Thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing with Grandma. Welcome back to my studio. You may recall in our last lesson that we did this drawing of a wolf in graphite. Well, I decided that I wanted to paint him in oil. So you can see that I've sketched him on my canvas. And I have placed on my palette my underpainting colors, which is Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber, and White. And then through those colors, I can develop my grays and my deep browns for undertones. So I'm going to go ahead and begin laying in the underpainting for this wolf. And you can observe the process. The first thing I want to do is find all the midtones and the darks and begin kind of redrawing in a way to kind of affirm what I've already sketched on the canvas and to correct any marks that I've made with my sketch. And while I do that, I just want to blend the grays and the brown and develop a little bit of white in the areas that have lighter values. So it's just kind of a piecing together of the drawing once again. There's a strong shadow right under his chin, and then it lightens up on the left. So I want to emphasize the different changes of dark and light patterns that are occurring. It's called the value language of a painting. You want to establish the dark and light contrasts early on so that you can establish midtones and the darks and the lights at the same time to establish the structure of your composition. His forehead is lighter, and it's also being hit by the sunlight pretty strongly. So I want to create kind of a rounded forehead with the illusion of the values changing as it moves to the right. So you can see that I have blocked in his shape. Now I need to reestablish the drawing and to make sure that I have all of those varied changes in value and tone established correctly. I want to soften and blend. And then I can do some stronger marks later with the final strokes. I need to make sure these eyes are placed and shaped correctly. The eye on the left has a little bit of a different shape because of the angle of the head. So I need to be careful so it has the illusion of that turned head. Okay, now I'm going to work in the strongest shadowed areas and let them work into the midtones and just continue developing the contrasts. This eye is going to be the focal point, so I want to be sure to shape it correctly. It has a brown eyeball, but I'm going to do that a little bit later. Right now I want to establish the shape and the darkest values. And right from the corner of the eye, it creates that round cheek area. So that will help with that illusion of the turned head and the beautiful form of his fur just kind of framing that lovely face. It's difficult to see underneath this nose where it meets the mouth, so I'm going to have to come back to that once the values are laid in and the paint is dry. Then I'll be able to use a smaller brush to establish the final shape of that mouth. I think this ear is too big, so I think when I place in the background, I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. But it's okay to build in the dark and light contrast. And then when I lay in the background value, I can cut in and kind of reshape those ears if necessary. But we're still at the beginning stages of establishing this drawing, softening edges, establishing the light and dark contrasts, while building the forms. I still need to fix that left eye. I'm going to do that. Every brush stroke needs to go the direction of the fur, so it just helps with that illusion as we create the texture of the fur and the details that really can just be suggested. Not every strand of hair is going to be painted, but if you can use your brush to go the direction of the hair and the whiskers and the light and dark contrast, it's going to help with those illusions, but keeping it simpler. So now I'm just going to go in with a lot of white and light gray to re-emphasize the light where it's hitting strongest and work it into the fur. So now I have laid in, you can see I've taped the border, so we'll take that off later. But I've laid in a dark value for the background so I can build the fur into the background. So I'm going to start now carrying my brush and working the background into the wolf and the wolf into the background. And so I need to unite those two. And you'll see how I'll start kind of making sure the edges are softened and the fur kind of just, the strokes just kind of work themselves into the tones that I put behind him. I'm going to come in later with a color glaze for the background. So that should be an interesting part of this demonstration. The next lesson or demonstration will be the final touches to this wolf, and it will be after he is dried and I begin to lay in color and details. So this is a demonstration that is focusing on the drawing portion of it, the underpainting, and the establishment of all the necessary parts of this oil painting. And then, when dry, we can go in with beautiful rich color and use smaller brushes to work on the details. So I'm going to reshape this eye, and you can see I'm taking a little bit of the burnt umber brown to soften the harsh gray and black areas and to give it some warmth. And then it will also match his eyeball, which is brown. And that will just help unite the colors throughout. So first I'm going to lay in and shape the brown eyeball. Carry a little bit of brown in there and then frame this eye with a black edge and the inner pupil. Some of this dark gray also comes out from the corners to help give some depth to the eyes. Some artists love to use the tiny brushes for all those details, but I like to use the bigger ones. I just feel that I don't want to be too tight by using tiny brushes and focusing on minuscule details. I like the broader brush strokes, and I like to suggest details rather than focus too much on them. This strong shadow is really important to help the illusion of his nose to be three-dimensional, so we need to keep that shadow going. We want to frame that beautiful face with those gray shapes on his mane. The light is hitting the top of his nose, so we want to keep that lighter gray, and then the nose itself is pretty black in the photo that I'm looking at. Okay, let's just re-emphasize now the lights. It's carried into the background. Let's emphasize the whitest hair on him, which is the edges, the shapes around the ears, the frame of the mane, the turn of the mouth, and working hard to keep that eye as the focal point. The light is hitting really strong here, which will help right against that nose for it to be a little bit more interesting. And then we're going to finalize the shape of the ears, and I mentioned before that I needed to reduce the size a little bit, and then when we do our detail later we can take some of the hairs into the background after we have the color laid in. So we're getting pretty close to having this underpainting complete. I'm going to put the little dots and the reflections in the eye, but I might need to pick it up a little bit. Don't want to go too strong. So we're getting pretty close. I'm going to take the tape off, and then you can see the compositional space the way I've laid it out. And now we have our underpainting. So in a couple of days after this is dry, we will continue this painting with glazes and detail. I hope you'll join me at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing and Painting with Grandma.